There's a fire burning low in front of me right now, banked down for the night the way I like it. Coals glowing dull orange under a skin of gray ash, throwing just enough heat to keep the cold off my back. The wind's up in the pines above me, and the snow's coming sideways past the mouth of this shelter, and I'm warm. Warm enough to feel my toes, warm enough to sleep. And that, right there, is the most dangerous place a man can be in the whole of the winter woods. Because here's the thing that ought to make the hair stand up on the back of your neck. A good warm fire, the friendly one, the one that saves your life and dries your socks and cooks your supper, and feels like the only friend you've got out here in the dark. That fire has killed more men in their sleep than the cold ever did, with a bare open sky above them. I know how backward that sounds. A man freezes to death with no fire. Everybody knows that. But a man with a fire, a good hot fire, tucked up warm and dry and drifting off to sleep, that man dies too. And he dies quieter. And he dies more often than you'd ever believe. And he never once feels it coming. That's the whole of it. That's the thing nobody warns you about anymore. Because nobody needs to build a fire in a snow cave to stay alive these days. And a rule you don't need is a rule that dies out. So stay with me, because once you understand this, you will never build a fire in a closed space the same way again. And you might just carry it in the back of your head on the one night it matters. Let me tell you who I am first, so you know I'm not reading this off a card. I've wintered alone in high country, where the nearest man was 2 days off through snow that came up past my hips. I've dug into snowbanks and holed up under deadfall and slept in shelters I built with my own hands and a hatchet, with a fire going the whole night through, because without it, I'd have lost fingers, lost toes, lost more than that. And I learned this rule the way the old hands learned it, which is by nearly buying the farm over at one time and never forgetting the lesson after. The men who taught me didn't get it out of any book either. They got it the hard way, some of them. And some of them got it by walking into a shelter come morning and finding a friend who'd gone to sleep warm and never woke up. No wound on him, no sign of struggle, just gone. Peaceful looking. That's the cruelty of the thing. It doesn't fight you. It lays you down gentle. Here's the first thing they hammered into me, and it's the thing most folks have flat backward. People think the enemy in a winter shelter is the cold coming in. So they do everything they can to seal that cold out. They chink the gaps. They pile snow tight against the walls. They hang a blanket or a hide across the doorway and weigh the bottom down so not a breath of wind gets through. They build the fire up big and hot, and they close that shelter up like a drum, and they lie down, feeling clever, feeling safe, feeling warm as a bug in a rug. And every single thing they just did to keep the cold out is a nail in their own coffin. Because the cold was never the thing that was going to kill them that night. The thing that was going to kill them was the fire, and specifically the thing the fire breathes out into that sealed up space. And I'll get to exactly what that is and how it does its work. But hold on to this first, because it's the spine of the whole story. The men who died this way didn't die shivering. They died warm. They died comfortable. They died with a good fire still glowing beside them, plenty of wood stacked for morning, a full belly maybe, dry clothes, everything a man could want on a hard night. And here's the riddle I want you to carry with you all the way through. The same way I carried it when it was first handed to me. It's the story of how a warm man freezes. That's what the old accounts call it, when they call it anything at all. A warm man freezing. A man with fire, dying of the cold's own work while the fire's still burning. It makes no sense the first time you hear it, and it makes perfect, terrible sense once you understand what's actually happening. But not yet. Keep it in the back of your mind. How a warm man freezes. It matters more than anything else I'm going to tell you. Before any of that lands, you have to understand what a fire actually is, down at the root of it, because we've forgotten. We flip a switch, or we thumb a lighter, and we think of fire as light and heat, warmth on the skin, a pretty dancing thing. But fire isn't just heat. Fire is a mouth. A fire is a living, breathing thing that eats, and what it eats is the air. It pulls the air in, and it burns the good part clean out of it, and it breathes something else back out. Any fire, wood or coal or oil or the tallow candle, does the exact same thing. It takes the air's good breath and it hands you back a bad one. Out in the open, under the sky, that doesn't matter one bit, because the sky is bigger than any fire, and the bad breath just rises and drifts off, and there's always more good air rushing in behind it. The fire breathes, the world breathes back, and it all stays in balance. But close that fire up in a small, tight space with a man sleeping beside it, and the balance breaks. The fire keeps eating the good air, keeps breathing out the bad, and there's nowhere for the bad to go, and nothing fresh coming in to replace what's spent. And slow, so slow you'd never notice, that little sealed-up room turns from a shelter into a trap. Now here's where I need you to lean in close, because if this next part doesn't land, nothing else I say tonight will keep you or yours alive. There are two things a fire breathes out, and one of them you can smell, and one of them you can't. And the one you can't is the one that does the killing. The first is the honest one, the smoke, the stuff that stings your eyes and grabs your throat and sends you coughing out into the cold. Smoke is loud. Smoke warns you. A smoky fire is an annoying fire. But an annoying fire is a fire that's trying to save your life, because it drives you to open things up, to fix the draft, to get air moving. The smoke is the fire shouting at you. But when a fire burns clean and low, when it settles down to those good hot coals with no flame and no smoke, that's when it goes quiet. And that's when it turns from friend to killer. Because it's still breathing out the other thing, the silent thing, the one with no smell and no color and no taste at all. And it fills that shelter up around you while you sleep, and you never know a thing about it. The clean fire is the deadly fire. The smoky one nags you awake. The clean one just breathes, and you breathe. And one of you keeps breathing, and one of you doesn't. And it isn't the fire that stops. Sit with that, because it turns everything backward. Everything in you says a clean burning fire is a good fire, a well-tended fire, the mark of a man who knows what he's doing. And in the open, it is. But in a closed shelter, a bright, clean coal bed with a sealed door is the most dangerous thing you can lie down next to, because it's doing its silent work at the very moment you've stopped watching it. The old hands knew this, the way you know not to grab the blade end of a knife. They didn't know the why of it, most of them. Didn't have the words we've got now. But they knew the what, and they knew it cold, and they built their whole way of sheltering around it. Let me tell you who knew this, and who died of it, because that's the heart of every one of these old lessons. The people who lived in this cold country, year upon year, generation stacked on generation, the folks who built the snow houses up in the far north, they never died this way, hardly ever. And it wasn't because they knew the chemistry of it, because they didn't. It was because their whole way of doing things was built around keeping the air alive. They kept a hole up top, always. A smoke hole, a breathing hole, and they knew never to close it, not even in the worst blow, because they understood down in their bones that a shelter that couldn't breathe would kill the people inside it. They burned small, careful flames in stone lamps, not roaring fires, and they gave the air room to move even when the cold came howling. The ones who died were the newcomers, the trappers and the prospectors and the soldiers and the lost travelers who came into this country and saw the cold as the whole enemy and threw everything they had at sealing it out. They copied the shelter and skipped the knowing. They saw a snug, closed house and built a snug, closed house. But they didn't build in the breath. And so they made themselves a warm and comfortable box that filled up quiet with the fire's bad breath. And they lay down in it and never got up. Same shelter, near enough. One built to breathe and one built to seal. That one difference is the whole difference between a man who walks out in spring and a man they find come the thaw, curled up peaceful next to the ashes of the fire that killed him. That silent breath the fire gives off, the one with no warning to it, is the thing at the center of this whole story. And I'm going to tell you exactly what it is, and exactly how it lays a man down. But first you need to feel the shape of the trap. Because the trap is the cleverest part, and the cruelest. It's built out of comfort. Every instinct a cold man has drives him straight into it. He's cold, so he builds the fire big. The wind's stealing his heat, so he seals the shelter tight. He's tired down to the bone from fighting the cold all day, so he sleeps hard and deep and doesn't stir. Warmth, shelter, rest. The three things a man needs most out here, and each one of them, done wrong, turns the key in the lock. That's why this thing is so deadly, and why it's killed so many. It doesn't ask a man to be foolish. It asks him to be comfortable. It punishes the exact behavior that feels the most like survival, and it does it to the careful man just as readily as the careless one. Maybe readier, because the careful man builds the tightest shelter of all. So here's the fix, and I'll hand it to you the way it was handed to me, in layers, because if I just told you the whole of it in one breath, you'd nod and forget it by morning. And this fix costs you nothing, not a dime. It's free as the air itself, and that's fitting, because air is the whole of it. The thing that saves you is the very thing everybody throws away when they seal that shelter shut. They throw away the breath. They scrape the airflow out into the dirt right along with their own lives, sealing up every gap to keep the precious heat in, never knowing they're sealing their own coffin. The fix is to give it back, to keep the shelter breathing. And there are 4 layers to doing it right. The first layer flips your whole head around, and here it is. Air before heat, always. When you're building or sealing a shelter with a fire in it, you put keeping the air alive ahead of keeping the heat in, every single time. Even when everything in your frozen body is screaming at you to close it all up tight. A shelter a little colder that breathes will carry you through the night. A shelter warm as an oven that's sealed shut can kill you before the coals even burn down. So you never, ever seal a fire in with you completely. You always leave the air a way in and a way out, low and high both, so it can move, so it can turn over, so the fire's bad breath has somewhere to go, and good air has somewhere to come from. You'd rather shiver a little and wake up than sleep warm and not wake at all. That's the first thing, and it's the thing that runs dead against every instinct the cold man has, which is exactly why so few of them live to teach it. I'll come back and lay the other layers out for you plain. But first, you need to understand the enemy itself, this silent breath. Because once you know its name and know its nature, the whole thing stops being a ghost story and becomes a plain rule you can live by. So keep that riddle warm in the back of your mind. How a warm man freezes. We're getting there. The thing that fire breathes out, The silent one, the killer, goes by a name now, though the old hands never had it. Carbon monoxide, they call it. But the name doesn't matter half as much as the nature of the thing. So let me tell you what it actually does. Because this is the part that turns your blood cold once you understand it. Your blood has a job, and the job is carrying air. Carrying the good breath from your lungs out to every corner of you, to your hands and your heart and your brain, keeping the whole machine of you lit and running. Your blood grabs onto that good air and hauls it where it's needed and comes back for more, over and over, breath after breath, your whole life long, without you ever thinking about it. That's the whole quiet business of staying alive. Now, here's the cruel trick of the silent breath. Carbon monoxide, that bad breath the clean fire gives off, doesn't just crowd out the good air. It does something far worse than that. It gets into your blood, and it grabs on. And it grabs on harder than the good air ever could. Far harder. Your blood, which is supposed to be out there ferrying the good breath around, gets tricked. It grabs the bad breath by mistake, because the bad breath holds on so tight. And once it's grabbed on, your blood can't let go, and can't grab the good air anymore. It's carrying the wrong cargo, and it can't put it down. So there you are, breathing away, chest rising and falling, lungs pulling in what feels like air, and your blood filling up load after load with the silent poison, hauling it to your brain and your heart, and none of it doing you a lick of good. You're breathing and starving of air at the very same time, and you don't feel a thing wrong, because the poison doesn't burn and doesn't choke. It just quietly takes the place of the thing that keeps you alive. And now, finally, the riddle answers itself. How a warm man freezes. Because freezing, the real killing of the cold, isn't really about ice on the skin. It's about the body running out of the fire it needs to keep itself warm from the inside. A body starved of good air can't burn its own fuel, can't make its own heat, and it goes cold from the inside out, even sitting right next to a blazing fire. The carbon monoxide starves your blood of air. Your body can't make heat without air, and so you go cold and slow and finally still, with a good hot fire glowing not 3 feet from your face. The warm man freezes because the fire that's keeping him warm on the outside is quietly stealing the air his body needs to keep itself warm on the inside. He's got heat all around him and no way left to use it. That's the whole terrible answer. And once you see it, you understand why the old accounts always describe those men as looking so peaceful. Because it doesn't hurt. The silent breath makes a man sleepy first, then dull, then careless, then still. It puts him to sleep and keeps him there. The lucky ones wake with a pounding head, sick to the stomach, muddle-brained, and have the sense to crawl out into the cold, clean air. The unlucky ones just sleep on through, warmer and warmer inside their own dying, and never know that anything's the matter at all. That's the mercy and the horror of it both. It's the gentlest killer in all the winter woods, and the gentleness is exactly what makes it so deadly, because a killer that hurt would wake you, and this one only ever soothes. Now let me give you the rest of the layers, because knowing the enemy's no good without knowing how to beat it, and the beating of it is simple and free. The second layer is the one almost everybody alive today gets exactly backward, and it's this. You fear the clean fire more than the smoky one. I know that sounds like madness. A smoky fire is a nuisance, and a clean fire is a joy. But out here, in a closed space, you flip that clean around, because the smoke is your warning bell, and the clean burn is the silent assassin. When your fire's smoking, it's telling you the air isn't moving right and driving you to fix it. And that nagging cough might be the thing that saves your life. But when it settles down clean and low and quiet, those glowing coals with no flame and no smoke, That's the moment to be most careful of all, because that's when it's doing its silent work and giving you no sign. So the old rule, the one that runs against everything a modern man believes, is this: never trust a fire that's stopped complaining. A quiet, clean fire in a sealed space is a fire that's turned on you. And this is doubly true of the coals, because folks think the danger's in the flame, and they let the fire burn down to coals and think they're safe. But a bed of coals breathes out that silent poison just as hard as an open flame, sometimes harder, burning low and dirty and quiet in the dark. And a man who'd never dream of sleeping next to a roaring blaze in a closed room will lie right down next to a coal bed without a second thought. And that coal bed will kill him just the same. The third layer feels almost like cheating once you know it, and it's the smoke hole, the breathing hole. You always keep an opening up high at the very top of your shelter and another down low, and you never close them both. Here's why it works so clean. The fire's bad breath, being warm, wants to rise, so it goes up and out that top hole all on its own. And as it goes, it pulls fresh, cold air in through the bottom, and that fresh air feeds the fire and feeds you both. You've made the shelter breathe without lifting a finger, just by leaving two holes in the right places and letting the heat do the work of moving the air. Two holes, that's the whole trick, high and low. And it costs you a little heat, sure, because you're letting the cold have a road in. But that little bit of cold is the price of your life, and it's the cheapest price you'll ever pay for anything. The old snow house builders knew this down to the ground. They'd sooner sleep a little colder with the air alive around them than seal up warm and quiet and never wake. Two holes, high and low, and you turn a coffin back into a shelter. The fourth layer is the one that sounds like pure madness, the one every part of you will fight. And here it is. When in doubt, burn less fire, not more. I'll say it again, because everything in a cold man rebels against it. If you're not sure your shelter's breathing right, if you can't build a proper smoke hole, if the wind's got everything sealed tighter than you'd like, then the answer is a smaller fire, or no fire at all for the sleeping hours. And you make up the warmth with more clothing, more insulation under you, a better bed of boughs, a tighter huddle. Because a man can survive a cold night wrapped up well with no fire. Men do it all the time. But a man cannot survive a night breathing the silent poison, no matter how warm he is. The cold you can fight with wool and spruce boughs and huddling. The silent breath you cannot fight at all once it's got into your blood. So when the choice comes down to a warmer, sealed shelter or a colder, breathing one, you choose the cold every single time. And you burn less, and you sleep a little rougher, and you wake up. The starving cold man's instinct is to build the fire bigger and seal the shelter tighter. And that instinct, followed all the way, is exactly what lays him in the ground. Now, I won't spin you a tale and call it fact, so let me hand you the thing that proves this is real and not just old campfire talk, because this one's written down better than most. The mining companies, way back, learned this the hard way underground, where men worked in closed spaces with lamps and fires burning, and they took to carrying a caged canary down into the mines with them. A little yellow bird. And that bird wasn't a pet. That bird was a warning. Because a small bird breathing hard in a small body feels the silent poison long before a grown man does. And when that canary keeled over on its perch, the men knew the air had turned bad, and it was time to get out, right now, before the same thing that dropped the bird dropped them. That's where the old saying comes from, the canary in the coal mine, and it's no fable. It's a rule that men wrote in the blood of their friends and then trusted their lives to every working day. When a whole industry full of hard, practical men decides to carry a live bird down a hole just to warn them about a breath they can't see or smell or taste, you can take it to the bank that the danger is dead real. And here's the part that ought to make you sit up straight. Because the same folks who ought to know better sell you the opposite today. Walk into any store and look at what they sell a man for the cold. Heaters you can run inside a tent. Little stoves that burn fuel in a closed space. Lanterns and cookers and warmers, all of them promising to keep you toasty in your sealed-up shelter. And half of them with a warning printed so small on the side, you'd need good light and better eyes to read it. The whole trade is built on selling you heat in a box, warmth without the bother of the cold. And they'll cheerfully sell you the very thing that fills a closed space with a silent breath, and count on you never reading the fine print. There's no money in telling a man he ought to sleep a little cold. There's plenty of money in selling him a way to sleep warm in a sealed tent. So they hand you the heater with a smile and let the tiny warning carry the weight. And every winter, sure as the snow, it takes a few more who trusted the comfort over the caution. It's no conspiracy. It's just the plain arithmetic of what sells. And the old knowing gets crowded out because there's no dollar in it. Let me be straight with you. The way I'd want a man to be straight with me. This probably won't be the thing that gets you, because you're most likely not going to sleep in a snow cave this winter with a fire burning by your head. But this rule reaches a lot further than snow caves, and I'd be doing you wrong not to say so. Every winter, folks die of this, in their own homes and their own trucks and their own tents. And they die for the exact same reason those mountain men did. Somebody runs a heater in a sealed-up cabin. Somebody sleeps in a truck with the engine going and the snow packed up over the pipe. Somebody drags a charcoal grill or a camp stove into a tent or a garage or a closed room to beat the cold, thinking heat is heat and a warm space is a safe space. Same trap, same silent breath, same peaceful, terrible sleep. The mountain man and the modern family in the stalled car by the roadside die of the very same thing, and neither one ever feels it coming. And that's the part that ought to stay with you. It doesn't warn you. Every man it ever took felt perfectly fine and perfectly warm right up until it had him. So here's how you carry all this. Not as fear, but as a plain way of doing things. Air before heat, always. Even when the cold is screaming at you to seal up tight. Fear the clean, quiet fire more than the smoky one. And never trust a fire that's stopped complaining. Keep 2 holes always, high and low, and let the shelter breathe. And when in doubt, burn less and bundle more. Because the cold you can beat with wool and boughs, and the silent breath you cannot beat at all. Anything that burns, burns the air. And burnt air in a closed space is death, whether it's a great fire, or a small, clean coal bed, or a little store-bought heater with a warning too small to read. That's the whole of it. Free as the wind. And the free thing that saves you is the very breath of air that everybody else scrapes out of the shelter in their rush to keep the heat in. Maybe that's the real lesson here. The one bigger than fire and bigger than winter. Those men didn't die because the fire betrayed them. The fire was only ever just a fire, doing the one thing fire does, which is breathe. They died because they trusted comfort over caution, because a warm, sealed shelter felt so much like safety that they never once questioned it. The wilderness doesn't kill the man who respects it half as fast as it kills the man who's gotten comfortable in it. And the old hands feared their own comfort more than they ever feared the cold, because comfort is the thing that stops a man asking questions. And out here, the man who stops asking questions is the man they find come spring, curled up, peaceful, and gone. So that's what I'd hand down to you ahead of any trick. Never let a warm night make you a careless one. So tell me, down in the comments, this. Is there a heater or a stove or a lantern in your own home right now? Something that burns fuel, that you run in a closed-up room to beat the cold, without ever really thinking about where the air's going. Because I'd like you to go and look at it tonight, and I'd like you to know before you ever need to know. Next time, I'm going to hand you another one that turns everything you've been told clean on its head. It's about water, and it runs dead against every good sense you've got. Because out in the cold, eating snow to quench your thirst, the one free drink that's lying all around you, thick as a blanket, is the very thing that can freeze a man from the inside and lay him down faster than going thirsty ever would. And I'll show you why, and what the old hands did instead. Until then, take care of your fire, and never let it be the last thing you're breathing.